And with this, may I please invite the moderator for the session, Dhaval Shahji, Chief Growth Officer in Corp Advisory, to come on the dais, please. May I please request Satish Ramchandani ji, Co-founder and Chief Business Officer, Updapt. And may I please request Abhirup Das ji, CEO and Co-founder, Oren. May I have a quick round of applause for these eminent panelists. Yes, and we have to start the next session of the award function after 20 minutes. So I think I'll request. Thanks, the house is yours now.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We are coming towards the end of the panel discussions. And before we start, I'd like both my co-panelists to introduce themselves and the business that they do, so that you have context of what we're going to talk about.
Thanks, Zirwal. So my name is Satish Ramchandani, and I'm one of the co-founders, and I head the business at Updapt. We are a ESG technology company helping businesses to track, monitor, and report their ESG performances. And before that, I was in the industry for about 20 years. Last, I was with Crystal Ratings for 8 years. I was heading the business for social sector ratings, and prior to that, with firms like Bank of America and Prudential Life.
Hello everyone, I'm Abhirup, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Oren. As Satish mentioned, we are also in the similar space of ESG monitoring and management, because that is one thing that is where we think like technology will play an important role. To give you a background about myself, I come from oil and gas industry. I worked there for around 3.5 years, and then I had my experience in the technology industry. So I spent like both in my early career in both the spaces, and now started with Oren, helping companies manage their entire ESG on a digital platform.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you, Abhirup. My first question to both of you is around the readiness. So, SEBI has put in a requirement for BRSR reporting starting this year for the top listed companies in India. Apart from that, there are requirements for startups to get fundings, for leverage companies to get loans. What is the readiness that you see in the organizations that you meet around ESG reporting and data fidelity? Abhirup, you can go first.
Thanks, Zirwal. So to answer your question on this, the readiness of corporates. So as we already had multiple sessions from all the MNCs in India, and even the people who have been associated in the ESG space. So in the morning session, as Mr. Rajiv has also mentioned, that it is nothing new, right? So we have been in this space, and we have been doing so many things on this space. So ESG reporting is just a new way of showing what we have been doing in this space of CSR, sustainability, and all. But again, with the BRSR guidelines, as we see more and more companies going ahead with the reporting part, so on the environmental side and even the social side, so I think there are quite a few data points which has to be ingrained in the data collection process of the companies. So today there is a bit of lag between the data that we are monitoring, and especially waste data, again the water usage data, the emissions data. All these data points are not being collected or monitored on a corporate level. So those are a few points which I think on the corporate side is missing. And when I talk about the startup ecosystem or the Unicorns, even for them it is quite new, because on a policy level, even on the governance level, we have seen so many things coming up Bharat Pay and all these activities which are serious concerns about governance. So those are few highlighting points about the startup ecosystem.
Satish, your view?
Yeah. So, I'll break the readiness into two parts. One is, at a process level, and second, I would say at a philosophy or a principle level, So I think the good part, what we've seen is that, the sponsorship is at the highest level. There's a buy-in by the board, there's buy-in by the CEO. Here I'm speaking about, the 1,000 listed companies, at least more than 60-70% of them, during our interactions, even if they don't have a chief sustainability officer, the CFOs are taking keen interest because they need to submit the ESG performance data to the CFOs or to the rating agencies or to the lenders, who have started factoring in their underwriting process. So I think at least at the sponsorship level, we are seeing that, the commitment is there from the board side, from the CEOs and, other functional heads. At a process level, however, even if you look at some of the data points, CRISIL came out with their 2022 report about 10 days back. Out of some 550 companies they looked at, only about 22% of them report sustainability performances. And if you really, look at the top 1,000 listed companies, I would put a number of only 10 to 15%. Right? So that there's a big gap in terms of the reporting. Though it was voluntary, this year it's mandatory, right? So they would not have any options. However, our interaction with the market suggests that, that firms don't have a process as of now, right? Or even if it's there, it's pretty manual in nature. The data are lying in multiple pockets, either in Excel sheets or half-baked data points. So yes, the readiness is not there, but I think the kind of investments which they are making at a policy level or at a process level, it's the speed is pretty fast.
Thanks, Satish. Given that we have two people from technology here, I'd like to look at solutions because we believe that technology can solve things that people cannot. And from the discussions that we've had today, I've identified 3 areas which are seen as major gaps across most of the panel discussions that we've been a part of. The first being capacity building, the second being data fidelity and audit trail, and the third being your availability of skilled people for ESG reporting or for ESG analysis. And I'd like your opinion on how technology can solve or address some of these issues. Let's start with the first one on capacity building, and Satish will go with you first.
So I think, again, if I'll break the entire set, or I've got a tendency, maybe I get a little nostalgic 20 years back when I used to do financial accounting, auditing and reporting, So if you look at the data sets, I'll break it into 3 principles rather. One is the scale. You're speaking about, like a headquartered company, in say Bangalore or Mumbai with operations across the globe, or, headquartered in New York and operations across various countries. How do you really manage that scale, of data? Second is the criticality of the data. ESG data points are not process data points. That information is going to be used for decision making by investors, lenders, rating agencies. So the data is critical. So scale, criticality, and third is a method. You need to present the data in line with various standards, right? You need to perform carbon footprint accounting. You need to do all that cycle. So how do you run that scale? How do you run the complexity? How do you ensure that the data which is critical is error prone, right? I think you would need technology. So coming back on your specific point on the capacity side, right? So yes, there is a gap between, I would say, the demand side of it and the supply side of it from a talent perspective, which eventually, is also giving a rise to another set of industry, which has its own commercial benefits, right? So whether you call it business schools or education schools, they are launching programs, But yes, it will have its own pace. Much of the action points would be on the companies, to create kind of awareness, create internal programs, to build that kind of capacities.
And the medium-term solution for this is to have courses in B schools and specific universities that talk on sustainability. But is technology a bridge for us to use until we get to that point of time is what we're looking for?
No, I think, so yeah, so I think it's so obviously it's what the architecture and other elements of the technology is. So at least, some of the solutions which we have seen in the market, or at least what we have built, we have mapped ESG parameters as part of a solution, right? So it's not that at an industry level. So the players in the market could see in the solution, these are the parameters which are applicable to my industry, and what you need to really do is just capture those data points. The activity of capturing your emissions, your activity of capturing the footprints, your activity of aligning to the standards, your activity of generating sustainable reports will be taken care by the technology.
Okay, so in some sense, technology can replace some of the skill sets required in the field. Abhirup, from a supply chain perspective, the complexity of data gathering becomes multifold, right? While you are looking at one organization when you are doing reporting for your own business, if you are going to look at your top 50 suppliers or top 100 suppliers, you are effectively looking at data validation and data fidelity across 50 organizations which are completely out of your control. Is this something that technology can overcome?
Well, that's a very good question, because see, like when we talk about supply chains of today, like the modern supply chains, they are more and more complex, and with e-commerce and everything going forward, and like a 10 minutes delivery that we are talking today, so then the supply chain and the scope 3 emissions in particular makes more sense to calculate, and that is where like, when we bring in so much complexity, that is where like, technology is the only enabler who can do this job at an accuracy which we demand, which the corporate world is demanding, or even the investors are demanding. So, like today, as we talk about technology, it is not only about the internal data or like capturing the data from our internal systems. It can integrate with the external systems of the vendors, and it can integrate with the alternate data which is externally available. So, give an example. Let's say like if a company has a sustainable supply chain policy today, right? How much of these policies are being implemented today? What we do, like we'll onboard our vendors with some disclosures, get the document signed, we'll say that these policies will be applicable to them. So these are basically on the documentation level we are doing. But when we are actually like giving a contract on a PO, are we mentioning all these things? Are there any penalties or like any repercussions for their payments to that? So all these things, if we are getting this out from the not only data, which is available on the public domain, so those things can be verified through AI/ML models, and that can help companies to like validate that how what is the effectiveness of the policy that the companies have already developed, and how sustainable these companies are running their supply chains. So that is how I think technology will enable things in a much better way.
Got it. From the question that our friend from Symbiosis Institute of Operations Management has asked, we are looking at finding an independent assurance or getting a report being assured so that people can trust it and take investment decisions or take operational decisions based on that. Is technology an alternative way of having high data fidelity and an alternate assurance? You being people who are outside of the business, can we use or can we see technology as a substitute for assurance, especially today when there's so much demand and there is very little supply? Satish, you want to take that?
So, see, technology again would really enable or empower the assurance process itself. So it again depends on the controls built around the technology solution, right? Definitely, it will give more confidence to the third-party auditors or assurance providers. Once they see that you have a technology solution managing that kind of scale, or a documentation being uploaded, or the data points, as Abhirup said, coming from an independent third party or a third party, from an API integration perspective. So in short, yes, it can definitely enable the assurance process by itself. And then, yes, I'm sure audit there would also have an element of the systems audit being conducted, at a certain periodicity, that, the technology which you have in place, from a process perspective is pretty robust, and, have all the necessary controls where it can be really relied. So yes, no doubt about it that, it could really enable and empower the assurance process in a real significant way. Again, I would draw analogy to, the auditor's report generated while signing off the balance sheets, right? I mean, it is purely, again, using high technology to really make the entire process more reliable.
I have one last question, but before we get there, I'd like to open the floor for questions from the room here. Any questions on technology and the kind of use cases it could enable for your organization so that you could envisage? Any questions from the floor? Okay. There's one there? Yes. Can you please get a mic up to her? Yeah, but the room will not be able to hear you.
Hi, this is Indu. I'm coming from Waycore Foods. So we are basically in the agri-commerce space. As an organization, we also have a ESG strategy because the organization covers a farm to table supply chain, which calls for a number of areas, social, environmental, where we want to track impact. My question to the panel is, how can these technologies support seasonal businesses like agriculture? You know, when we say ESG reporting, some KPIs are monthly, they are monthly in nature, which can give you a lot more steadier monitoring mechanism versus some are seasonal in nature, like how we see in agriculture, right? Let me give you an example. If we want to track how Waycore's interventions have impacted farmer livelihood, we need to wait for one season of cropping to complete, compare it with the next season so that we have a comparative analysis. So can technology be customized or transformed in such a way that it can take up such complex or seasonal industries also to efficiently report ESG KPIs?
Thank you, that's a great question. Anyone wants to take a shot at it?
So, like, I know this is a typical problem which will be, like, as you mentioned, it's a seasonal kind of a thing. So, here, see, like, technology can play a role in terms of the replicability of the same thing over the period of time. So, today, again, when we talk about technology, it has to be trained on the models there. So, the initial data gathering or the data part will have to be configured, where we'll have to wait for a few, like 1 year down the line. And post that, as in when we have more and more data, that will give us much more accurate, modeling and all those things over there. So, I know few of the companies who have been using weather data and all the other parameters to like improve the overall yield and the overall output of agricultural land. In India, again, like there are many startups who have been doing this, and for them also, like the starting was bit slow, but over the period of time, because of the larger set of data that they are gathering and generating, it has been much more fruitful and much more easy for them over the period of time.
So what you're saying is that to create a data model, you will need initial data from one cycle or two cycles, and then as more data is received, that model can be fine-tuned to meet the requirements for reporting. You want to add to that, Satish?
So I think it's what science you build in, you know, from a technology perspective, you know, you could align it to the business use case, right? So the frequency of the data, because it's seasonal, is one part of the thing, right? You can sort of build those predictive analysis, you know, to gauge what the performance is going to be in future. And actuals, once it begins, it becomes a cycle, you know. I mean, that's the only additional input I would add.
Right. Any other questions from the floor? Okay. One last question for both of you. Today, what is the biggest roadblock that you see from organizations who are willing to adopt technology as a part of their standard operating procedures and reporting? Both of you can take a shot at it, one after the other.
I think the current challenge from an India market perspective, I would say, is you know, it's purely the awareness. I would say, you know, it's purely the awareness of the ESG landscape, I would say. Right? Even firms are taking their own time, you know, in terms of understanding the concept, you know, and sort of implementing the entire strategy, designing the strategy and then implementing the strategy. I would say even good sized listed companies are still sort of really thinking, okay, what should be my strategy and how do I really implement it, From a technology perspective, we, at least personally, our experience has been that, as I said, because the sponsorship is at the highest level, we don't see any much challenge from a budget perspective. The larger challenge is more on the designing and executing the strategy, that how do I reach my net zero goals, how do I really design and execute a decarbonization strategy.
Got it. Abhirup?
So I have a different opinion to this because today when we see the corporate world, they are getting into this compulsory reporting of BRSR. Obviously, I agree with Satish, this awareness is the biggest problem. But apart from that, the main problem or challenge is that today everyone is getting into this process for the first time, like for most of the companies, I would say. And like an analogy to this, let's say we decide to become healthy on the 31st of December, right? So 1st of January, we all get enrolled for gym membership. And we will sign up for a personal trainer so that we get acclimatized to that. And post that, then we'll figure out that how we can do it online or we can have a treadmill in our house, and so that we can ease out the entire process. So that is the entire phase that we are going through right now. So everyone wants to try out things by deploying, engaging with consultants who can help them with the entire journey. It's a hand-holding process. And once they are gone through this process of initially identifying a discovery, that we say, post that they will definitely get into this adoption of technology. So only people, so now as you already mentioned, the question was the roadblock. So the roadblock is the availability of resources who can understand this landscape and who can help these corporates to bring this to up to pace. So today, CFO is a national extension of a CSO today. They are playing this role of overall managing the entire ESG landscape. So if there is a CSO who has a knowledge on the environmental, social and governance aspect and the entire ESG, so he or she will be definitely looking into ESG tech solution. But if a CFO is doing, he will first get used to this entire process and then definitely go to technology.
Got it. Thank you, Abhirup. From his answer, I realized a couple of things. One is I did not introduce myself. My name is Dhawal and I work with Incorp Advisory. And the second part is the consultancy he was talking about is us. So if there is, it creates value together with technology and people coming together to solve a problem. Thank you very much to my panelists. Thank you to the audience. And I really appreciate the discussion that we had. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for meticulously adhering to the time schedule. Thank you so much. May I please request Rusen ji to come and felicitate the panelists of this session. Rusen ji is very fond of books these days. Thank you. May I have a big round of applause from the audience?